Okay, so first of all, thanks to Jussi and Fritz for having this idea to speak about publications. I was quite surprised, of course. I thought I don't have to give a talk here. So it's now something completely different I've never spoken about. So I'm not speaking to you as a representative of a publisher here. In this case, it would be either Birkhäuser or Springer, but I'm speaking to you as the editor-in-chief of the journal Integral Equations and Operator Theory in the first part or larger part. And in the second part as one of the 5 editors of the book series, Operator Theory, Advances and Applications. So when I prepared this application, I was wondering what you as authors might be interested to know about the journal that you don't know already. So maybe let me start with 5 not so publicly known reasons why possibly IEOT could be a good choice to submit one of your next papers. So here it is already. So first of all, IEOT is a pioneering journal in operator theory, I think one could say. I checked with Journal of Operator Theory. It was only founded 1 year later, but for IEOT it was 1971. The founding editor is Israel Gochberg. I took over 30 years later, yes, 2008, right? So it's already 14 years now that I'm doing this job. Secondly, I have to say that IEOT has a fantastic community of referees, and I see many of my referees in this audience actually. And I cannot measure this, how many articles and authors have an acknowledgement to the referees. But it's certainly more than 50%. I think really it's nice to read how the authors find these comments helpful. And I know that these referees are really hardworking. Then maybe a feature that is not so common these days, IEOT does not have page limits. I mean, it doesn't really make sense anymore. I mean, things are not printed, so the publishers have for them it really doesn't matter. I think the most important point is it's more difficult to find referees for long papers. That's maybe an issue. Maybe this is the reason why many journals have this, but I think there has to be also a place for more substantial and technically demanding papers. Then something that you may only notice when you see how the papers are kind of what the page numbers look like. So if you look at that, you see it's not running page numbers anymore, and this is due to the fact that IEOT has started to run CAP, continuous article publishing, already something like 4 years ago. So this means, in short, online published is published. So immediately when the paper is appearing online, it's already published. It's the same, no time gap anymore between the two. Then IEOT does not run a brief opinion filtering. This is a very common thing also in the LMS where I work as an associate editor, of course, to cope with the large numbers of submissions. I mean, this is a problem for all the journals, obviously, but I mean, I see some dangers in this brief opinion filtering. It's more difficult for younger people to get in if they don't have strong co-authors on the papers. They are not yet known. And also, there is less room for the unexpected. So if I can avoid it in the future, I would like to avoid it in the future. There are other tools that maybe can help a little bit here. Now, there are other things that you can find yourself on the web page. So, of course, the journal metrics that you see on every website of the journal, maybe for you and for me, the overall author satisfaction is a nice value here. And what you can also find on Springer's website, it's about open access in IEOT. And this is maybe something to take into account for you when you submit something. So many either institutions, individual institutions, but also countries have, yeah? Yeah, the first that I take. It could be also a reject. Yeah, the first decision. I mean, it's, you know, I mean, everybody knows that there is a large quantity of papers that you cannot even send to a referee. I mean, this is the same for all the journals. And I think it's the job of the editor to somehow recognize this, right? I mean, this is the same in all the journals, I think. The percentages may vary. So here, IEOT is a so-called transformative journal. This means it's on a transformative process to fully open access. So at the moment, at this stage of the transformation, the open access agreements have been signed by a number of countries. And I'm showing this because when you are a group of authors, then maybe some of the authors work in a country that has such an agreement and others work in a country that doesn't have such an agreement. So it's important to know you have to choose the corresponding author then who has such an affiliation, because the corresponding author is the reference point, right, for later. And it's very difficult to change titles, corresponding authors, and whatever. So look at this before you submit even, right? Now, on the next slides, I would like to show you what kind of instruments and information publishers like Springer, Elsevier give the editors to help them do their job well. And so here, for example, so this is from the annual reports that every editor of every journal gets. And so, for example, you see that the total number of submissions to IEOT is roughly 300 per year. And what is maybe not so well known, that IEOT is competitive. So, I mean, the rejection rate is for years already above 75%. It's now going a bit more to the 80s. So, yeah, this number, of course, has to be taken with care because this is an overall number. And as I said, there is some part of a subset of the manuscripts which is really not qualified for such a journal. And there is another instrument which doesn't show up on the slides. The big publishers all run plagiarism software. So this is, for example, one such instrument I can use, and it is very nicely made. So you see every portion taken from which paper. You can look at the sources. You see if authors do a lot of copy and paste from their own papers. You see if they do it from other papers, and you see if they cite these papers or not. Olaf. Sorry, I couldn't hear you. The plagiarism software is only seen by me. It's only seen by me, not by the referees. No, not by the referees. Yeah. So, I mean, once as a referee, I knew already a set of authors where I had myself a high percentage. Then I asked an editor for it. But it's usually confidential only with the editors, right? Okay, so the next thing is that you get information where the authors come from. So this is the total list. This is maybe not so informative. Let's go to this page where you see the graphics. And it's not only the countries, it's a comparison between the submissions and the acceptances. So here, for example, you can check as an editor if there are countries with a higher rejection rate. So you can also check this for individual countries. And of course, you get also an idea where most of the authors come from and so on. So that's also kind of interesting. This is also an interesting table. There used to be a flow chart. This is the manuscript tracker that tells you which journals have accepted papers that you rejected as an editor. So, for example, I would not want to see a journal like Journal of Functional Analysis here. And I've never seen it. So this is always, I'm always looking at this. And so complex analysis, operatory, linear algebra, Journal of Mathematics, they are all fine. They are like sister journals having the same set of authors, and they have a higher turnover, I think, or total numbers. So this is fine. But so that's also a control you would see as an editor if you maybe made a big mistake in the past. So I think that's always interesting. Then also interesting to judge your own decisions, or also what the referees said, sometimes you remember, of course, this is the list, the all-time top 10 full-text article requests. it's not maybe so amazing. I mean, I was hoping for this already, that Mazia's great collection of 75 open problems in PDEs is the leading paper. Right, so this is not such a surprise, but I mean, I know the second author, Rostislav Hruniv, personally for quite a long time, and I'm very happy to see him here. Maybe I couldn't have guessed, but so there are also authors here in the audience. For example, Alessandro is also on this list, who spoke an hour ago. So this is sometimes unexpected. I remember one case where I was... No. For me, let me finish my sentence. It's sometimes unexpected when I was once close to a rejection of a paper, and this paper then had a very high interest. So I remembered this paper. I thought it was very specialized, but maybe I was wrong. So then you also see which years the papers come from that people download. So you see 30% is like current. This was for 2021, so the current year is 30%. Archive is only 8%. Of course, people might get papers also from other sources. I mean, if people download stuff from the archive, of course, the Springer website doesn't see it, right? And then there is also how people come to these websites, maybe not so such a surprise. Mostly they come from Google. MathSciNet, of course, is not free for everyone, so this is not the biggest source. And then also the visits by geography, so it's by regions, and then from the region you also see who are the leading countries here. And that of course corresponds also a little bit to how the authors and so are composed. Yeah, and then finally, this is you are all asked for feedback on how the publishing experience was. Of course, you don't fill that in every time, but so at least it's nice to see that the numbers, I mean, 5 is the highest, and that none of these steps is below 4. Also, especially production, because this is something I'm always very concerned about. If something goes wrong in production, then of course authors complain to me. So even there we are at 4.5, which is okay. But anyway, so this is what you get and what you can work with. And I think these tools are very useful, especially I use a lot this plagiarism tool, and I have at least once discovered really a literal copy of a paragraph from a paper that wasn't really cited, and so a discussion started with this author, and so I think it's useful. Okay, so now the second part is about the book series, Operator Theory, Advances and Applications. So there are 5 editors and of course an editorial board, which I haven't listed here. So for example, Pavel is on the editorial board, Fritz is on the editorial board from people who are in this audience. The book series was founded a year later than IEOT in 1979, and as you can see, we are approaching volume 300. And these are the latest volumes. I think this one has appeared in the meantime already. So here is something edited by Fritz to honor Lance Littlejohn for his birthday. And here we have something from Markus and his co-authors, Christian Seifert and Sascha Trostorf. And so here again, also here you get a report from the editors about the data for the book series. And interestingly enough, this very new volume, and the authors usually don't see that, unfortunately, but sometimes, of course, one can tell. So the evolutionary equations book has already got a very, very good interest. So it's at the moment leading in the top downloaded books since 2018. There is also a list which is the all-time citations list. So you get to know which books of the almost 300 are cited how often. So you would expect, of course, the early volumes have an advantage. They are longer on the market. But in fact, the leading book here is the monograph by Markus Hase on sectorial operators. Well, I mean, I have an explanation. It really fills a gap in the literature. So many people refer to it. And of course, the early volumes appear here too, Kutschmann, Kochberg, and so on. So these are well-known books, of course, in the series. Well, database that from the website of Springer. I mean, they count the downloads, right? Ah, cited by. Oh, that I don't know. That I don't know. Either Zentralblatt or Mathscinet, one of the two. It has to be, right? I mean, these are the only sources, at least I know, right? Yeah, and then maybe one last word about the open access in the book series. It is different from the journals. So for the journals, it's already a bit further advanced, I would say. So here it is more on an individual basis. If you want to know a successful case of open access, how open access was achieved, then you can consult Jussi. He has done it for, this is not in OTAA, it's in another book series of Springer, but the procedure is the same. And on this website, you find more information. A hint that I would give both for the journals and also if your country doesn't have an agreement, and also for the book series, if you write a grant application, so for example, the Swiss National Science Foundation requests open access publications, but they support it also. So there is also a section where you can apply for money. So if you have a plan, for example, to write a book or a monograph or something, and you apply for funding, then please consider applying for this. I mean, sometimes you don't know in advance, but with a book, maybe you have some plan. Of course, we are always looking for new monographs. And so if you have a plan to publish something, you can send an email to any of the 5 editors. There's also a form on the website, I think, but usually the editors among each other present these projects, and you can also ask us questions, of course. So books have quite a big range of pages. They start from 150 pages up to, I mean, it's incredible how thick they can be. Pavel, how thick is yours? That's not the maximum yet. I think it goes further. It goes beyond 700. I don't know how practical this is. Yeah. So the size of a volume is quite flexible. So I was amazed how thick they can become. Okay. So if you have any more questions, I'm happy to answer now and also later. But for now, I think I would like to stop and thank you for your attention.